just delighted through the connection with Olivia Schneeberger, who's one of the student curators this year, to have this talk today from Chiko Chazunguza, who's coming to us from about 25 kilometers outside Harare, from a village, which is really going to be the subject, I think, of what he's going to talk to us about. So he's in the field, on the ground there, which is great. And we are, and Chico is a Zimbabwean a visual artist and works across disciplines. A lot of his work is about questioning the post-colonial condition and the unstable role, let's say, of the artwork and of that kind of activity in that post-colonial context. And he's the founder of the Dzimbanhete Arts and Culture Interactions, which is a meeting place and a resource center that organizes creative programs, mentors artists, and collaborates with locals and international practitioners in, in all kinds of cultural activities. And Chico's going to talk to us today about that, but then also particularly about this All Afrika Village, the AAV, which is this major initiative that he's set up, building initiative that he's set up in Zimbabwe. We may well get to have some bit of a tour of it at certain points if the Wi-Fi starts to act up. But for now, Chico, thank you very much for joining us. We're going to have the usual format. Chico's going to talk to us for about half an hour or something like that, 25 minutes, half an hour, and then we'll have an opportunity for conversation and discussion. So, as usual, if people have questions, if you want to put them into the chat, or if you just want to raise your hand or say you'd like to speak, then you can just come on and talk. So, Chico, we'll hand over to you. And I know Olivia, you're doing the slides, so
Okay.
two-hander that we're getting today.
Um,
Thank you very much for joining.
Well, thank you very much, you Campbell. Thank you, Olivia. And I also would like to thank somebody who's a friend, a colleague, very supportive in the arts. Your mom, Catherine. I think she's here as well in this discussion. Yeah, she made it possible for things to work out, and I think she was instrumental in pointing her fingers to me, so Olivia could pick on me to give a talk here. So thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be on such a platform to talk about a project that we've just started, and apparently to see it gaining some appreciation from institutions like yours and other institutions that have been inviting us to give talks. It really is very encouraging. I'm really happy to be sharing with you some of the information that have led to the creation of the All Afrika Village, and also to share with you some of the sort of milestones we have hit as an organization. As stated there in my introduction, yes, I have a fine arts background, having trained in art and having taught art. And it is that based on that background, particularly of the training that I got in Europe, that when I came back, the idea of giving back was very strong in me. So I also started teaching. But while teaching, I also realized somewhat the institutions I was attached to here in the country. I trained in Europe, by the way. So when I came back to start teaching at a local college here in Zimbabwe, I realized some of the subjects and the content that was that we were meant to impart to students according to the curriculum were still not just resonating, but were actually very similar to what I had studied in Europe. For example, when it came to art history and art theory and art appreciation, the theory was pretty much the same. And that kind of frustrated me a bit, because I felt like we were teaching students to become sort of creatives, but within European standards. So I started to dig and to find out what I'd learned out there, which made up the philosophy and the aesthetics of say, creativity in Europe. And I tried by all means to change how we're teaching and to bring in new material, but it wasn't easy because this was like a state-run institution, so you can't change things easily. So what I realized was missing was the African narratives themselves. They were not involved in art teaching. The culture, the elements of heritage were not involved in art teaching. So basically, our students were simply becoming artists who, yes, could fit anywhere, but would not be contributing anything new philosophically, aesthetically, and otherwise to the global culture of creativity. And so at some point, I realized I had to leave the institution, and I left the institution. And then together with a couple of colleagues who were like-minded, we started Dzimbanhete. The idea at Dzimbanhete was now to dig into the other cultural elements, which are not necessarily the crafts, but the narratives, the taboos, the totems, the creativity within the indigenous culture that's normally not regarded as art. And we started moving towards that. I'm happy because when I look back, I then see that some of the artists we worked with right at the beginning, who actually absorbed some of this information, they then went on to be great artists. They are some of the artists whom Zimbabwe is proud of right now. Some of them have represented Zimbabwe at the Venice Biennale quite a lot. Basically, on most of the Venice Biennales, we've had at least one or two artists who have come through Dzimbanhete. It's not like when they go out there, their work is talking about taboos or is talking about something so ancient in African culture, but basically their minds and their aesthetics, their aesthetic appreciation became something else. So they were able now to create differently. So having created that platform, the platform also needed, we needed people to come in. We needed an audience as well. Because we're the small gallery, even though we're not galleries, but we're the small gallery to show the works that would have been created. We then went on to bring in some music. The music we chose, because we needed music to kind of make some noise. As you know, visual art is silent. So nobody will know that there's a piece of art in that room unless something else draws their attention. So we decided to bring in music, and we chose intentionally Mbira music. Because Mbira music, if you've not heard about it, Mbira music is one of the most ancient musical genres in Zimbabwe. Mbira music carries with it like the lyrics, which are from 1,000 years or so ago. It carries the beats from 1,000 years ago. And so it carries with it some narratives, which we would really call, say, Zimbabwean, if we were going to talk of this space, of this space in terms of the geographical name that we have now, Zimbabwe. With that music, we propelled it further. We had shows and so forth, and it became an entity on its own. We're now known as a venue for Mbira music. But we went on then, we wanted to bring in other countries as well who have the same Mbira music, so we could get more narratives. And so an idea came. Mind you, I said my background is in the fine arts, so creativity sometimes goes on like on autopilot. So some things begin to happen in your head and some things begin to manifest. So we decided we were going to have a culture festival. And in this culture festival, we were going to invite people from other countries. And then we realized, if these people come in, where are they going to display their wares? We did not want people to come in and display their crafts, their wares, their etiquette in tents. Normally at festivals, you have these pavilions and their tents. And we didn't want that to happen. So we said, now I think that's the point we engaged with architecture now, because we were talking of space that we were going to use for a specific display. So none of the conventional spaces would really work for what we wanted. So we decided we were going to build villages for these guests of ours who will be displaying their work at the festival. So the idea of the All Afrika Village then sank in. We said if we're going to have a festival of African culture, we need first to build, to construct the spaces in which that culture will be displayed without imposing on it. But it has to be displayed in its natural setting. Then, so the idea of All Afrika Village came by. And since then, our main project has been the All Afrika Village. So with the All Afrika Village, what we then set on to do was to, first of all, disclaim ourselves as masters of other people's cultures. We said we were not going to build the structure simply by looking at pictures. We were going to invite people from the specific countries, from the specific cultures, so they would come in and tell us about their architecture, not simply from a physical form, but also together with the underlying information that shapes that architecture. Over the past, I would say 2 years, we've managed to bring in some people as we've assisted in construction. Before that, we were actually at another venue. This venue where we are now, where most of these images you see is a new venue. The old venue, we had moved quite miles in terms of achieving this goal, but unfortunately we had to move from there, and we're at this new venue, which we're happy with, which actually allows some the setting that we really want. Our idea is to construct these villages in such a way that they are aligned with the map, the geographical map of Africa. And apparently, our geographical space here actually allows for that. The natural hills that you find here, the hillocks with lots of granite borders, allows for the African map to be actually structured nicely without deforming the geographical map that we know of. I think for now we can go into
I think we're losing you there, Chiko. I'm not sure if you need to move, maybe. Just as we were getting into the architecture. Olivia, do you know if Chiko knows that he's? Oh, I suppose he's just trying to come back in, probably. Oh, he's dropped out. Okay, we'll try to bring him back in. Just bear with us for a minute. We're just trying to reconnect with Chiko. He's coming to us from this village that he's talking about. So I think he mentioned the signal is a bit unpredictable in some parts. Are you in touch with him by email, Olivia, or text? Or
Yes, I just sent him
he's coming in.
a text message.
Okay, great. Chiko, sorry, we lost you. Ah, there you are. You're outside now.
Yes, I realized, and I had to change my. I'm outside now. I hope this is going to. So where did you lose me?
Just as you were starting to show this picture of the this hut, you were just starting to talk about
Okay.
the how what you started building.
Okay, great. About the.
Chico, maybe turn your video off so
Okay.
that
Yeah.
you have better signal.
Let me just go to where I can see the. Video is off. Now I need to be able to see the video that's being screened.
At the
Okay,
moment,
my
yeah.
video,
See that?
is that better?
That's better for us, or certainly we can hear you.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, great. So yes, I was going to ask for a screen, for a slide.
Can you not see the screen? Because I am sharing it.
Okay, now I can see it. Okay,
Okay,
so what we have on the screen here is the Kavango. The Kavango are part of the Namibian ethnic groups, and we actually were lucky just before I think the second lockdown. We invited a lady from the Kavango village, and as it is, of constructing these structures is also that we actually get informed as well on African indigenous architecture. Before she came, very funny, before she came, we actually decided to lay down the poles in a circular, normally the huts you see are a circle. So we had actually put the pole so that when she comes in, we would have covered some ground. She would just still attraction and so forth. And funny enough, when she got here, she actually told us that. So we actually had to start afresh. And she was here for less than a week. It's actually a square. What you see in here is the upper part still needs to be shut. Finally, when it's finished, it's actually filled in with earth. Structures are actually earth-based. It's all natural material from the roof to the ground. It's all natural material. But the way the Kavangos do it is they put the upright sticks, and then they have the ones that cross, several that cross to create kind of a grid. After they've created the grid, then they mold balls of clay, which they then fill into those made right straight onto the wall. They are not made separately. They're actually made directly into the wall. And then it dries, and then they don't plaster the outside. And this, according to Kavango culture, this is the main structure that they build at the house, at the homestead, which is a bedroom. This is the primary bedroom. This is for father and mother. Nobody else, according to the culture, goes in there. Other little kids can do so, but once kids are grown up, they don't enter. So it carries that secrecy of pride. We can go on to the next slide.
A little bit. You're a little bit in and out, but we're getting it. It's okay now. I know it's hard.
Lost. So I've changed my position again.
That's better. That's strong.
Looking for a better position.
Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
So we're getting a map of your village just by listening to you where the signal is. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, this one here is the Ndebele homestead. The Ndebeles are in the southern part of Zimbabwe. These normally when people hear Ndebele, they associate these Ndebeles with South African Ndebeles. Now, South African Ndebeles are very different from Zimbabwean Ndebeles, closer to the Zulus of South Africa than the Ndebeles over there, Zulus over there. Forget the borders, otherwise they will be the same people, the same Zulus. So interesting, their structure has these poles on the outside. Those poles you see going around the structure, they are not part of the earth structure. In fact, if we go to the next slide, please, it should show. Next slide, please.
We have this. We have the slide of the interior now, Chiko. Oh, I think we've lost. Oh, Chico, you're on mute.
Okay.
Maybe intentionally.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Now we can. Yeah.
Okay. So the interesting part of this structure is that the roof from the inside looks like it's floating.
Yeah.
It doesn't sit on the wall. And this is typical of the Ndebele structures. And it also explains that how the Ndebeles are part of the Nguni tribes, which you will find in Mozambique and in Malawi, where the earth part, the walls are not attached to the ceiling or to the roof, and they are independent. So when you go up to Mozambique now, the wall structure is much smaller, and you have a big roof with a big veranda extending outside that roof. And the wall can actually be broken down independently, and the roof stays. Are we still together?
Yes, we are. Yes.
Okay, great. We can go on to the next slide.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the Koisan. This is, you get the Koisan people in South Africa, Zimbabwe, very small number in Zimbabwe, and Botswana and Namibia. Basically, this is how they construct their huts. What we might have done here, which they don't do, is to make this more permanent. Normally, they don't make their structures permanent. They are people who are always on the move. So depending on the season, they would actually move on. So they don't really get to have as much of the straw above their dome structure as we did here. Basically, what we agreed on with our technical people was that when we have something like a festival, we would then have sort of the not so permanent structures around this one. But for showcase, we would have this one so that people can see how the architecture can actually evolve into something more permanent as well. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. Next slide, please.
We're on the next slide now, I think, Chiko.
Yes, yes. That's the Tswana hut. The Tswana hut has a roof that looks more like the Ndebele that we just saw earlier on, which is like the step thatch. The grass is not like straight from top to bottom. You see those steps. And this is the reason for this is that grass does not necessarily grow very tall in those areas. And it's easier to build this way. And basically it becomes also more like a decoration. This is Tswana hut. It's not yet finished. We're still working on it. But the reason I also showed it here is is for people to see the structure on the inside before the clay is put on the wall. Within the Bele one, we saw the wall, it has some earth. This one still does not have earth, but basically the build is the same. The Tswana one here is going to have some earth as well on the outside, together with sort of what would be a stoop outside, a half moon stoop, which they're putting on now. We understand earlier as we were doing the research that they would actually have the half moon, which is a stoop now, used to be a straw fence. And it was there within that straw fence that cooking would happen, not necessarily inside the house, but outside. And also that straw fence functioned also as the maternity. If a mother had to give birth, it would happen within that straw fence and not in the house. Next slide, please. Yes, this one here is the Ebo Compound. I think on the other slide, we're going to see the other two structures, but this is the main compound. Yes, let's go down. That's inside that main compound. That one which was just seen on the left side. You see that one, right? That's the Ebo Compound. 2 huts and one big like chalet, if we can call it. And that big chalet, that's the space where visitors are accommodated. That's where conferences and all discussions get to happen. And as we heard from our contact in Ebo culture who actually came here, I'm sure people have read or if you come across Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. Chinua Achebe is a famous writer in Nigeria who wrote a novel called Things Fall Apart. It was very popular here on the continent. And he spoke of this village. And our historian friend who came to tell us about the Ebo culture actually brought in that Okonko was the hero in that novel. His village was like this, an Ebo compound. So in Ebo culture, which is something very interesting that we came across as we were researching, that African culture, African architecture is shaped by the traditions of that culture. Like in this case, a man is known to have 2 wives in Ebo culture. So if you go to that slide where we see 3 structures, you have 2 round huts on either side in front of that sort of gazebo structure. And those 2 huts are for each woman, those 2 round huts. Each woman owns a hut there, and that main building, that's where the father normally sits, accommodating and receiving visitors, dealing with issues of the village and the household. Inside there, you'll see like there's an inside slide. That inside slide shows us how inside is all benches, a built-in bench, almost right round. There's a gap where you may have a chair by that father, where he sits when he's talking to other people, but other people get to sit on these benches. There's a small room on the far left on the left-hand side of this bench, I think the other slide shows that, that small room is his space, his private space where he sleeps, where he sits. It's like a study, and is always there most of the time, apart from visiting wife A or wife B. We can move on. That's the view from outside. Now, those round things are cylinders. They are earth bricks. They're sometimes used for construction. This is just earth. It's put in a tin and then it's pounded until it sort of hardens in that tin, and then it's released by shaking the tin, and then it's left out to dry. This is purely earth and nothing else in it. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. I'm trying to get better network here. Now, this is the Zezuru hut. Zezuru is sometimes called Shona. Sometimes called Shona. And this is one of the main ethnic groups in Zimbabwe. That's the outside. As you can see, the roof, the grass is much longer. It's it continues down straight. Not that the grass is that long, but the thatchers make sure that there's that continuity, that smooth run, because the grass is taller and it allows for that. We can go inside. Next slide, please. That's the inside as soon as you enter the Zezuru hut. And calling it Zezuru hut also is a way of just labeling it so that we can talk about it. But in the culture itself, it's called mother's domain. And that makes a lot of sense, which normally you don't get to hear about. There's a lot I'm going to talk about this hut, because I think being Shona myself, being Zezuru myself, gave me a better opportunity to look deeper and at sources for more information when it came to this particular hut. So this bench, which normally would be on your left as you enter, and in some spaces, in some areas, it could be on your right, but basically the shape is the same. This is called Chigaravakwati, and Chigaravakwati means a place where those who have just come in to be fed get to sit, and the culture, men get to sit here. Remember, I said this hut is called mother's domain. So fathers, men can get in here, but it's not their domain. So they just come in here to be fed. That's why they sit on this bench. Once they are fed, they leave. Next slide, please. This structure here, which is right in the center of the room, which also is in line with the door, is called a piwa. The piwa serves for two purposes. One is that it blocks the wind from coming in and blowing off the fire or disturbing the fire. Two, it has a very special attachment to the mother of the house. Should a father or his children or anyone from that village break this, well, I'm talking about this ark that's right in front of the picture. Should they break it, they'll have to pay the mother and they'll have to fix it. And should the mother of this house pass on, die, her people are the only ones who can come and remove this very object here, this ark, this piwa, and take it away. They can break it if they want, but none from the husband's family is allowed to break it. We can move on to the next slide. That's the piwa in action. Normally you have a fire lit just behind it. That's where cooking happens. Further than the piwa, right across the room, there's that big block over there. I think the next slide may have it a bit more clearer. That's called a chikuva. That's the altar. No, I think it's further away. Anyway, let's go back to the one above. Yes, that piwa, that chikuva acts as the altar at the home. This is where people kneel down to give their grievances to the ancestors. The Zulu culture is very spiritual. We believe in the teachings and the guidance of our ancestors, those who were gone before us. So Chikuva is actually the altar for that. And the building of Chikuva is not like just any other physical structure. The building of Chikuva demands that a ceremony is held during the construction of this Chikuva. A ceremony is held and elders take off to the grave of a previous ancestor. They beg the ancestor to come and protect the very family that's now starting a new home. And they then take some earth from there, which they bring and mix together with the earth they're going to use for building Chikuva. That's like cloning the grave of the ancestor and bringing it home. So you to your ancestor directly. We can go on to the next slide. Above the Chikuva, normally, there's a shelf. It's something that we still have to build in this one. What you see in there, that's that very graphic sculpture there. Those are plates, cups, pots, and all sorts. Normally, it's a shelf that's built over the Chikuva itself. The significance of this is where mothers of the house would actually show their own crafts, womanship, their skills in terms of decorating their space. So they'll build a shelf where they would have their, now of course we have this enamel and Chinese utilities. But back then it was, yes, the wooden plates, the wooden spoons, the compass, the gourds, and then the jars that were more natural. This mix really interests me in the sense that you have something very modern placed on something very sort of traditional, and it creates quite a visual which competes within say contemporary art itself. I remember at some time I actually got an award by taking a photograph like this. This is not the one though, but basically the design, the graphic appeal becomes more imperative. Next slide, please. This is the doorway. Looking from inside the mother's domain, this is how you'd see the door from outside. And something quite interesting that we learned as we were researching as well is the construction of a door was not just like creating a physical structure. The poles that create the door frame were not necessarily the same poles that would have been used around building the walls. When it came to the door frame, they would actually go and find trees that have properties, natural properties of repelling badness, of repelling bad energy, in such a way that the belief and the knowledge there was if somebody is having some bad energy, something within them, bad spirit within them, as they enter this house, the energy of the tree, of that special tree that has been created, that has created the frame, would actually ward away the evil, ward away the badness, and the person would walk into that house as a normal person without any negativity on their shoulders. We can go on to the next slide, please. This is what you see when you look up in when you're in grandmother's kitchen, grandmother's domain. Actually, saying it's a kitchen is a kind of just giving names, but it's mother's domain. This is what you see when you look up. Of course, you see the same thing in the Ndebele. You'd see the same thing in the Tswana homestead. But among the Zezuru, our research also showed that you don't just have those verticals, the sort of those diagonals that go and meet in the center and the apex. The number is not random. Similarly, even those that go around, the numbers again are not random. They would actually say, unfortunately, when you did this research, we'd already built this one, so we might have missed with one or two. But it is said, the elders used to say, when you're building that roof, those long ones, the longitude that go up, the number, their total number has to be similar to that of a woman's ribs from both sides. I'll repeat that. The number of those long poles that go and meet right in the center had to be similar or equal to the number of ribs of a woman from either side. This plus this side, left plus right. That's the total number you would get. Remember, we said it's mother's domain anyway, so it's not a surprise. Then the ones that go round from a big circle to a small, until you get to the smallest circle there, they were supposed to be equal to a man's ribs from one side. Interestingly, even on marriage, when people are getting married, here man and woman don't get married really. A man marries a woman. That's if I'm translating directly, a man marries a woman and not the other way around, or the two getting married. No, the man marries a woman. So the man goes to pay lobola. That's the dowry. That is what's called the marriage. So when the man goes to marry, again, within the list of the protocols to be followed, there's a name that's similar to those poles that go round from the big circle to the smallest circle. There's a name that's similar to that, which means the idea of the construction has something again to do with what happens within marriage, or what's regarded as special within marriage ceremonies. Kind of saying the culture is really entangled. It's really a tapestry. Next slide, please. Now here we go to the contemporary side of Dzimbanhete. Like I said, we started off with art and the practice, mentorships and so forth. This is a project that the reason why I put it here is just a recent project that has been completed by one of our mentees, who's from Israel. She was with us for 2 years. And this is the Star of David that she kind of transformed into a 3D. And it's within the contemporary area. We have an area where we have the cultural side, which is the arts. We have an area where we have the contemporary structures and where contemporary art happens. So this is Git Solomon. You can go on to the next slide, please. That's the structure on the opening day, opening reception. It's a shade. She translated the Star of David into a shade where people can actually sit underneath there, and basically it's a hit when it comes to kids. Kids really love it. All adults were standing around it, but kids were like climbing and really interacting with it very well. I can go on to the next slide, please. These are some of the workshops we run. This is a screen printing workshop. I'm a printmaker myself. And somehow I have faith with printmaking that it equips an artist with some of that other logic that some of the crafts within fine art do not necessarily do. The patience, the planning, and all that. So this is a group that had come in for a screen printing workshop. Next slide, please. At the village, we organize these school camps and kids culture camps. So children do get to come either with their schools or with their parents, and they get to enjoy a day of mingling with culture, particularly that which they don't really see at home now. People have been captured by modernity, so most of the times they don't get to interact with that which is rural or that which is, say, indigenous. The food, the games, the stories, the narratives, the food processing itself, the house chores, some elements which actually enlighten one's mind, like hunting. How do you set a trap? How do you decide where to set your trap and things like that? So we turn that into kind of some business logic as well. So it helps them out there. So those are some of the school camps we run. Next slide, please. Oh, that's Git Solomon's show. Again, we're using these structures, the village structures that we have, also become part of the contemporary in terms of how we respond to them and how we get to use them. So this is at the Ebo village, and that's where, because it's used in Ebo land, it's used for housing people and sitting like in conferences. So we still respond to it that way. We use it for conferences. So this at Git Solomon's reception, we actually had people sitting in that space, and speeches and all protocols we followed in that very space. Next slide, please.
I think that's all of
That's
them.
it. Okay, so yes, I'm glad. Thank you. So basically, that's it on Dzimbanhete. I tried to say as much, fearing that I would get disconnected before I finish. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy.
Thank you so much, Chico. Is it possible to put your camera back on, I wonder, just so we can, I know you're,
Yes, so you can see
if
me.
we can manage it. Oh, you're back inside. You're almost.
I'm
Yeah.
back inside.
Now we recognize the backdrop much more following
All
that
right.
call.
Okay, cool.
We have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes for some questions. So again, if people do have questions or comments, if you put them into the chat, or just say in the chat that you'd like to ask a question, then I can call on you, or I can I can repeat your question for Chico. Chico, it's an amazing project, and it's very interesting how the way you described it. You began with making art, and then you moved to making music, and then you moved to making the spaces for all of that to happen in. There's a very clear sense of how a culture grows from the ground up, let's say, and then that architecture comes into it, enters into that process at a certain point. I thought that was really interesting, and then that the way that you were able to describe how the different cultures that you're engaging with, how they're reflected in the built form, well, in the methods of building, in the form of the building, in the structure, and so forth. I mean, I think that's all really, really rich. You're explicitly also then have this aim that you want to have a multiplicity of cultures present in this place. And you want the people from those cultures to come and build directly. So, can you talk a little bit about how that work? Which I assumed is to do with quite ideas of dialogue, education, people learning about other ways of doing things. How does that aspect of it work?
Yeah, true. It's more, I would say it's more educational than it's recreational. It's recreation with some kind of gaining some knowledge as well. Just a while ago, I was talking with my colleagues. We have a group, I think the image didn't come through, a group of kids from the community who just came when we were having a festival, and they said we have a dancing group. So we started working with them, and they've been coming all along. Said, and this is something that I like, this group of kids who are about 12 to 13, if we expose them to all the people we're going to invite from all these countries to learn a dance from that particular country, by the time we finish building this village, they would have learned about 165 dances. It's almost like they will have PhDs in African dance without necessarily having a certificate or a paper in their hands. You know, if we take the women from this community and we expose them to the cuisine and the way of cooking of each and every person who visits this space to share with us, because when we bring in people to share with us their architecture, it's not like all the time they're dealing with architecture. We also have time to ask them about certain stories. How do you cook? What do you eat? And if we have women in this community learning how to cook a particular food from a particular country, by the time we finish this village, they would have learned like 165 or more ways of cooking and other foods that otherwise they would not have eaten anyway.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. So it's more of recreation, but it's very educational as well. And to our artists, it's like gaining narratives and gaining information that can build on to their practice.
Because what you noted at the outset is like with your European education and others of your peers, that there was basically this, effectively everybody was learning in the same way. It was the same curriculum, the same models, and so your aim was to try to, let's say, develop a greater knowledge and appreciation and ability to work with African cultures.
Right.
One, which I think is, I mean, it is very interesting the way that, as you're describing, the making and use of the architecture also connects into lots of other things like cooking, etc.
Right.
It's never just the thing itself.
Yes. Architecture is the home. Once you create the home of that culture, it's like everything that happens within that space begins to manifest as well. Yes.
You also made a very interesting analogy at the end, towards the end. Well, firstly, actually, interesting. We had a talk on Monday about data centers and advanced technologies and so on, and the word being used there was entanglement, and you also used the word in entanglement, like a tapestry is what you talked about, which is very nice.
Right.
But you also made this analogy or a connection between printing, your discipline, and building, because of, as you said, the need to plan.
Yes.
Patience, the need for it's a slightly indirect method, isn't it? Because you're
true.
Kind of produce something else. Is that what you're? Yeah. That's very interesting. Could you say more about that?
Yep, I was again asked about that. How come artists who then become, it's a young writer was asking, how come the artists who came from Dzimbanhete became big? And is it because of printmaking that you use as the basis? And what is it that's in printmaking that makes their art forms or their way of thinking become greater and bigger? I think, yes, printmaking, apart from it being an art form, and when it becomes an art form, you're seen as somebody who reproduces. So sometimes the print does not have much value because it's in numbers. But the process itself is, I think, is greater in the sense that you have to know what you want to do. And once you know what to do, you have to start, and it goes in stages. Whatever you want to do does not just appear like you'll be doing a painting, but you have to go in stages, like creating, where it's a positive, you're creating a negative. Where it's a negative, you're creating a positive. And once you print it there, sometimes it doesn't make sense. It doesn't even look like anything that you wanted to do anyway. But you have to continue layering until it begins to speak the language you start with. Or sometimes the technique itself unfolds in a different way than you thought, and it becomes another image. It gives you another leeway. So again, in that process, you have to be patient. And that process, you have to be a bit more articulate in terms of, because you're touching, if it's a piece of paper you're printing, you're touching it several times. It's bound to get dirty. It's bound to get torn. So you, at every corner, you have to be very careful. You have to focus. You have to understand where you're going. Yeah. And so the idea of layering as well, as many layers, the more layers, the better.
Yeah. So in a way, you're like building up, like building, like, and as you say that,
like building, yes, like building, and like now at once the village is there, and I'm also surprised as well in terms of the ideas that are springing out of the village itself, things that we never thought of, but because it's there and it's home for more layers. It's home for more layers. Yes.
I mean, I wanted to ask you about, just in finally, maybe about, you referenced the Israeli artist who made that, the last pavilion that you showed. So you obviously also have an interest in producing new things, new forms.
Yes,
new ways.
yes, true. Like we have the cultural side where the villages are, but we actually have a contemporary gallery. Like I should have shown that slide as well. We actually will be having an artist from Germany whose artwork is whose medium for creating art, for expressing herself, is light. She works with lights, and we've actually built a gallery for that to happen in. So that's very like high up for like contemporary art.
Yeah.
Even I don't have an idea of what she's going to do, but the medium just interests me. Similarly with this, with Git Solomon from Israel. It was like, oh, the Star of David, we've heard about it. So, oh, that's your culture. Oh, you want space to do that. After 2 years of her trying to draw, trying to do all sorts of artworks. And then I was saying, okay, you need to do something that's true to you. And she has a background in origami.
Okay.
So basically, she had not brought those two together, unfortunately, in a creative journey. But by talking and being part of the mentorship here, side as well, where we actually invite even architects to say, hey, come and get inspired by this African architecture. Come for a residence. We have a residency for architects where they come in and they can sit in as we build a certain structure, because some of the structures that we're going to need here are very functional, like ablutions, for example. It would be good to have a link between the contemporary modern and the indigenous and see what kind of architecture comes through in the middle. We're open for that.
Well, Chiko, if we can share details, which we will, we'll put the details of, I presume, I think there's a website, and if people are interested, which I think they may be, you know, in knowing more, maybe in coming to do to make something. Is that's possible for people to just with you? Is it?
Okay, great.
Yeah. Welcome back.
That's very possible.
Fantastic.
That's very possible. Yes, I'll share that with Olivia. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Chiko, is that where you're sitting now? Is that the first hut that you showed with that roof that hovers above the wall?
Yes, this is this is Mother's Domain, where you have you have the Chikuva, And also, I spoke about the man side, which is this side, but there's that side which looks empty.
Yeah.
But it's very sacred, where you have the stromates. It's a sacred space where only women sit there. Men are not allowed.
Okay.
Over on this side, women can sit here. It's not a taboo. But men are not allowed to sit over on that side, because that's also the maternity ward.
Okay. I'm say we have something similar here, but we don't really. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
It sounds like a great idea, though. But you're allowed in on that side. You can sit on that side, just not the other.
I can sit on this side. I can't sit on there. That's bad luck, sitting over on that side.
Particularly when you're not when you're being recorded on Zoom. Anyway.
Not when maybe when I'm alone. But the reaction is the karma will work on me. It's about karma. Yes, right. It's about the karma. Yes.
We don't want to put that at risk for you. So.
True.
Chico, I'm conscious of time. We've taken more than an hour of your time, and you've walked outside and inside to try to keep a connection with us, which has been fantastic. I know that a number of people have already had to go. I think there were messages about how enjoyable this lecture was, which I would certainly agree with. And I think it's just great to, I mean, I suppose to be reminded about how fully imbricated architecture is in our cultures, how expressive it is of culture, but also how powerful it is, as you were saying, as a sort of medium. As a way, almost as a way of communicating, connecting, and learning more about people. So it's great to see this work. And as I say, we will share, if we can, the details if people want to follow up when we put this up on Zoom.
Okay, great.
But for now, maybe just to say thank you so much again for, I know it's a hot day there, so thanks for bearing with us. Well, hopefully we will be in communication again. Thank you. And you can see there's a few messages coming in the chat as well. I think people just showing their appreciation for the work.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks, Olivia.
Thank you, Olivia.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure being on this platform.
That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. We'll talk again soon.
And we'll follow the work, and maybe we'll have you back to find when there's more.
Thank you. We're looking forward to finishing the SADC region within next year. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I'm sure we'll talk again.
Great. Thanks.
Okay. Great. Okay. Bye.
Right.
Thanks everyone.
Bye. Cheers. You. Bye.
Great. Thanks, Olivia. That was great.
Thanks, Hugh. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think that worked. I mean, it's hard with those connections and so on, but I think.
Yeah, I think it was fine. The boys can edit some of those glitches out. It'll be fine. Yeah.
Perfect. But look, no, it was quite a very interesting man and place. So I think that was that's your mum.
That's my mum.
I'll let you use the call. Like, I think if I make you host, you can stay on, right? Do you want to?
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. Thanks, you.